Welcome to Two Open Doors, the podcast that explores our power to open or close the doors of relationship with the important people in our lives. We hope you'll learn from and share your wisdom with our community. Thanks for joining us. Hi, I'm Claude Cruz, and my hope is that this podcast will help you find and embrace the power of choice in your life. We humans depend on each other for many, many things, including the satisfaction that comes from deep and meaningful relationships. I'm personally passionate about promoting and supporting the sort of magic that can happen when two people decide to open themselves to one another. The resulting deep connections can be absolutely life-altering. I know that such connections are the source of tremendous meaning in my own life. So what about the cryptic title of this podcast? Well, I was inspired by the way that the double doors between hotel rooms work. When hotel staff want to provide an extra large space by combining adjacent rooms, they unlock and open both of the back-to-back doors. Of course, the people in either room can open their own door at any time from their side, but unless their neighbors do the same, all that happens is that they're confronted with a blank door. It occurred to me that this is a great analogy for the way human relationships work. Truly, as the saying goes, it takes two to tango. We can badly want to have a relationship with someone, but unless that person shares a reciprocal interest in us, we're just going to be staring at a closed door. In subsequent episodes of this podcast, we'll be exploring many related and important topics that I think you'll enjoy. We'll be digging into questions such as, what are the doors in our lives? What purposes might closed doors serve? What kinds of locks may be keeping our doors closed? How can we choose to open those? How can our closed doors limit us, sometimes without our even realizing that they do? And what sorts of adjoining rooms might we be able to visit by opening our doors? We'll be exploring these and many other topics in the episodes to come. I'd like to start our journey together by telling you a little bit about myself and why I'm so interested in this topic. I've been a keen observer of life for, I think, a good many years now. I'm in my late 60s, and I've always been interested in what makes us people who we are and what makes us act the way we do. My formal and professional education is in the sciences and engineering. I spent 35 years in the high-tech world, designing digital systems and leading large teams of engineers at places like IBM and Intel. And while I enjoyed the intellectual challenge of those activities, engineering ultimately just didn't satisfy my curiosity about people and relationships. Those are topics that are much more personal than what you're likely to encounter in engineering activities. In terms of my upbringing, I was raised in a very conservative household in which coloring within the lines was positioned as a virtue. For many years, I lived a life that was focused on being productive and, quote, virtuous, as defined by parents, church, and society at large. Still, I've always had a strong spark of curiosity and free thinking. I'm basically an explorer by nature, and thus somebody who's inclined to ask questions and think deeply about things. The more I did that, the less satisfied I became with following someone else's playbook for my life. Over the last 20 or so years, especially since welcoming my dear wife Penny into my life, I've been on a voyage of reconsidering how I want to live so as to maximize my contributions to the world while also getting as much satisfaction and personal meaning as I can in my own life. I developed a notion that I call rechoicing, which by intent, of course, rhymes with rejoicing. This is the idea that by using my freedom as a mature adult, I can choose how and with whom I want to live my best possible life. And my thinking and belief is that if I can do this, or if you can do this for yourself, there's going to be lots of cause for rejoicing. You'll find that life is much more satisfying. In terms of my passions and perspectives, I've been very curious about people, basically a lifelong student of the human psyche and of the underlying brain and nervous system. I'm the sort of person who's very interested in hows and whys. That has led me to study psychology and the cognitive sciences, as well as quite a bit of neurobiology. And I'd like to think that the resulting understanding has given me insights into my own choices and actions, as well as those of others. I'm fascinated by personality theory, that is, the study of what makes each of us the unique human beings that we are. At the same time, I recognize that we have many, many things in common with each other. Of course, all this curiosity and study of human nature has also piqued my interest in human relationships and how those work. The older and hopefully wiser I get, the more I value my relationships with my own small circle of precious friends and family. We humans are a very communal species, just like our primate cousins. During our hunter-gatherer past, individual humans really couldn't survive by themselves. They relied on each other for sustenance, for shelter, and for protection. And yet, with our own overblown industrial and post-industrial egos, we may feel that we're now independent beings, fully and solely in charge of our own destiny. I think that's bunk. Events such as the current COVID pandemic remind us, sometimes rudely, that we deeply affect one another, and that we're deluding ourselves if we think we're truly independent beings. We're not. We're interdependent. My digging into human nature and my own relationships experiences have led me to a somewhat surprising and unexpected direction. I've been on a quest to understand and embrace a healthy relationship with the world of the senses and with our sexuality. As the animals that we are, and I see that as basically a good, sound thing, the senses and touch are a very important part of our existence. We are literally neurologically wired to register and respond to pain and pleasure, and both of those are channeled through our senses. And yet, in spite of this primal reality, our society seems to be deeply conflicted about the role of our bodies and our senses in daily life. Many, or most of us perhaps, are raised with messages that our physical nature is inherently flawed and weak, and perhaps even demeaning to our potential as human beings. I see much of this as programming that's learned from social organizations such as churches, schools, and governments, or from parents and other caregivers who have themselves previously received that sort of programming. My own belief is that our bodies and our natural appetites are not inherently bad, and thus in need of tight control and even suppression. It's not hard to posit why organizations such as churches might have an interest in controlling our physical nature, and in particular, our sexuality. Those are very powerful forces, and whoever can regulate those has an effectively tremendous lever for securing people's compliance with their directions and wishes. Of course, you can think about situations involving the compulsive pursuit of pleasure, or the satisfaction of one's own appetites at the expense of others, which really is pathological behavior. And those are indeed undesirable conditions. However, avoiding that sort of extreme case does not warrant, in my mind, trying to altogether shut down or deny our natural drives. So to turn in a somewhat different direction now, thinking about my goals for my own life and for this podcast, I mentioned that I revel in my own close relationships, and especially in my intimate relationships. In those connections, I feel that I'm more able to share more of myself and experience the full richness of others in ways that I see as simply impossible to achieve in other sorts of relationships. Because those sorts of close connections are so precious to me, I need to be able to decide not only who I want to relate to, but how I'd like to see those relationships evolve. It's crucially important to be able to exercise my adult power of choice without external editing by other people or organizations. With respect to the Two Open Doors Forum, we'll be exploring the full roster of topics that relate to choosing, establishing, and nurturing two open door sorts of relationships with the important people in our lives. I'll be sharing some of my own thoughts and perspectives, but I'm also going to be inviting listeners to share their own wisdom and curiosity. I really believe that we can learn from each other. I'll be entertaining listener questions, and we'll also be having guest presenters, guest podcasters, who will bring topics that hopefully will interest you as well, and which mesh with the general topic of two open door relationships. My hope is that with openness and some luck, and with your participation, we can establish a Two Open Doors relationship community that we can enjoy and benefit from well into the future. So I'd like to close this brief introduction by again thanking you for listening and for sincerely inviting you to join us for the meaty discussion that I think lies ahead for us. I look forward to getting to know you and to exchanging views with you for our mutual enrichment. Take care. Bye-bye.